Welcome to the Equitas generation. I hope you're all keeping well, folks. I am super excited for tonight's live. I have the pleasure of being joined by Michelle McCarthy, a psychotherapist, a counsellor, and the founder of an ever-ending improvement, and one of my guides through life as my sister. I wanted last few days of toxic masculinity, misogyny, the patriarch, and so many other of these things. Nice laptop. Can you see me now?
No, but it's fine.
I know. You won't be able to see my wonderful facial expressions.
It's,
All right, let's kick this off. Who are you and what do you do? Tell us a little bit about yourself, Michelle.
so I'm getting over being a bit sick, so I'm a little bit hoarse, so ignore the voice. So my name is Michelle. I am Shane's sister. I suppose mainly I'm a psychotherapist in Limerick. I work privately, but my background, and I suppose why Shane probably has me on today, is that I've always been interested in this area of, I suppose, sexual violence, domestic violence, women's issues, anything like that. So it started back when I did an undergrad, and psychology was part of that. I also did a diploma in criminology and criminal psychology. I did one in cognitive behavioral therapy, and then I went on to do a master's in counselling and psychotherapy. And then after that, then I spent a year training with the rape crisis, specialising in sexual violence. So that's kind of the background I'm coming from. I suppose I'm probably why we're here talking, why we usually talk, because we have an interest in this area.
I would think so, definitely. And I'd say one of the other reasons I wanted to get you on is over the years, as you'll know, with a smile on your face, I've been fairly staunch in certain ways that I look at things, certain ways that I approach things. And go back a few years ago, I probably wouldn't have been as open-minded as I am now to be that constructive criticism, people giving insights, or people just being right and me being wrong. Um, a lot of that is evolved and changed from discussions that we've had. I think that's fair.
Yeah.
And not being so black white about things. And when we're getting into the situation of what's happened in the last few days, the noise that's around it, I wanted to get you on because we were having a good chat about it today, and I was asking you, and then I literally just went, "Would you mind going live because we should have this chat publicly?" So to start this off, obviously you have a big grounding in this, a big background in this, and a deep understanding in this, and a deeper understanding than in the mind, the behaviors, the habits, the psychology, the mindsets of people, better than most. So with that in mind, what are your thoughts about what has happened in the last few days, about what has gone on with Chloe or Ella, the girl in UL, and the mob of 200 guys? And if you don't know about that, I'll get into it with you. But what are your initial thoughts when you saw all this, and how does it make you feel when you see this with the understanding that you have?
Um, okay, I'll go separately with the questions. So with Chloe's, that was obviously shared massively. I don't follow Chloe, or I never have followed many people in the influencer sphere, but I saw it straight away. I saw it was a 15-minute video, knew it was going to be serious. Lots of women were sharing it, and please listen. And of course, if somebody says that, absolutely, I will listen, because it's bound to be important. And I suppose the biggest thing, lots of emotions come up. So frustration, anger, um, empathy. God, it was such a difficult situation to be in. It was absolutely spine tingling watching the video of the guy with the belt and how he was, and watching Chloe have a perfectly normal reaction, and her attempts to shut it down so she could compose herself enough to see the video. It's something I see the whole time, people apologizing and almost feeling embarrassed about their feelings, or something that is highly traumatic. At that moment in time, she's faced with something which is potentially, could be death, could
Yeah,
be any sort of assault, abuse, anything like that, and she has no idea. And her brain is racking, trying to figure out what to do. And I think any woman, in particular, or anyone that has suffered that or gone through that, can empathize and understand the fear she must have been feeling in that minute, and the courage and bravery that she had no choice in showing. Really, she just had to survive the situation. So she
Yeah.
did all the things that she could do. But it's incredibly frustrating, but also something I see every week in my job. If I'm being honest, I see it day in, day out. People presenting with the same issues, the same frustration, the same trauma, the same abuse, and trying to make sense of it and trying to understand it. And unfortunately, some of the comments I saw with the video were talking about blaming her for showing her location or for saying it or different things. And I suppose that's frustrating coming from a sexual violence background in training and in understanding and within my job. I can 100% see why victim blaming is common, but also um, it's not helpful, it's not useful, and it actually means absolutely nothing in the grand scheme of things. Because if a perpetrator wants to do something to you, that is all that has to happen. They just need to make a decision that they're going to do that, and then it increases the chance of it happening. So I suppose the frustration with that, and with the other girl with the 200
With Ella.
fine, again, massive frustration. I only read about that today, so I haven't read the full story, but I did read an article about it. And again, not taken seriously, the blame almost put on her in a sense, and just massively frustrating. And off the back of, I suppose, the show Adolescence, how we can see how gender-based violence and any sort of violence or sexual violence or abuse against women is just so, it's just permeating every part of society now, every situation,
It's
and the
scary.
conversations have been had. Yeah.
Do you find it hard to detach between Michelle, the woman, the mother, the daughter, the sister, the wife? Sorry, Dev, put you in last there. And Michelle, the psychotherapist, the counselor, in moments like this, or is it all interconnected automatically because of the fact you do this every day as a job, and you do this, to be fair, this is why I wanted you on. You do it as my sister, you do it for everybody around you. It's literally a natural thing you do.
Um, the thing is, would I separate that? No, the only time I separate that is understanding that within the capacity of a therapy session, that my expressed anger and frustration may not help the my client, or may not help the girl I'm in the session with, or the guy that I'm in the session with. So while I might talk about, completely understand the rage, the frustration, and go through all them, it doesn't help for me to input my feelings about it. Rather, it's to help them make sense of it and understand and give the psychoeducation in the background and debunk the myths, and then help them with the coping mechanisms. So in that way, but also empathy is using your full humanity. If you don't have that in the room and you can't understand them as a woman, they're they're likely going to feel safer with you, especially if they have been assaulted by a man in the room. That's just what we see in therapy. So I think it's important then to use your womanhood and your femininity and your strength and your empathy as a woman to hold space for what that girl has been through.
I like
So I
that.
try not to separate it really. I think it's all part of it, part of the
I
package.
really like that. What are your thoughts when you look at some of those comments? I mean, I went and we shot a podcast with Katie Sheen. I think she's watching now the other day, and we were talking about Chloe's story. We talked about Gary Noon and his one, and then we talked about Chloe's story, and we went on to a newspaper, a Facebook page that I will not name because fuck them. And they had 656 comments, and I would say solid. Katie read out 8 or 10 of them. Solid 100 of those comments were from men. At least 50 of those comments were around men being victims. In this, around 25 of those comments would have been women or men giving out about her and her friend, and her being an influencer and dramatizing this. And then the other 25 were just from guys I'd like to have a one-to-one with and have some fun. And that's my anger coming up. So I know you don't like that, but I'll just say it as is.
You can't dramatize statistics. So what are they on about? You know, the majority of violence is committed by men. Even the violence against men is the majority of it is committed by
74% of
men.
all attacks are by men.
Right, there's
74%.
loads of them.
Yeah.
I have my emails are full of rape crisis statistics, and throughout the years, my folders are full of college research articles, full of statistics on this. But you can't dramatize them. So and you know what? Personally speaking, as a therapist, in my room, anytime someone has come talking about abuse or violence, one male in the time I've spent in my room has come talking about a female that abused him. The rest have been regarding men. So that isn't dramatized, that is experiences. And actually, a lot of the time where I've had, because I have had perpetrators in my room too, a lot of the time when I have perpetrators of abuse, domestic violence, not even domestic violence, just violence out in the streets, stealing, things like that, a lot of them come with this belief that they are hard done by, that the world is against them. And so there's a irrational rationalization for their behaviors. And I think that's dangerous territory to get in. At the end of the day, it actually doesn't matter. And I do this as a job. Explaining behavior doesn't excuse it. And that's what needs to be taken into account. So you might say, I've been rejected, I've been hurt, I've been doing this and that. And I'd say, okay. And they'd say, well, that's why I did it. I'd say, no, that's completely separate. Now you're retaliating. Now you're reacting. Now you're choosing and deciding, because of this, I want to do this. That's on you. That's your part. And so we have to separate that. So when men pipe up and talk about being victims, I would, as a therapist, then I would be really curious to go into what is the message that they feel isn't being heard, that they're saying. That rejection is hard, that you're hurting too. What is it? That's what I want to actually get into, the vulnerability, because men have a tendency to attack, right, and defend rather than be vulnerable and get into what's actually going on. And so that's what I see in the comments. I see a lot of firing, using the same old sentences, the same old tactics, but it's a new conversation we need to have about what's actually going on, what's actually driving these people in these moments to do these things.
Is that irrational rationalization? Did I get that right?
Yeah.
Is that irrational rationalization why you would see some of those, the principle behind why you would see some of those guys commenting in the way they are as well? In other words, do they have unresolved trauma? Do they have issues with women? Do they have something that they're missing in their life, etc., that would lead them on to think, I'm going to come on and verbally abuse a girl who, if her man wasn't in the room, most likely would have been in a situation that would not have ended well, based on all of the variables at play that we can see transparently. It looks like it was going to go a bad way, and they feel the need to come on and say, well, you're an influencer, or you're being dramatic, or where does that need and want come from? And I asked the question, not just aligning to Chloe, but I just wrote an article about it there over on one of the other brands I'm involved in, and talked about the abuse that people take online and get online. And I'm just curious, without going off on a tangent, what's in your mind is the root cause or the variables at play that enable that to happen?
So much. Like, the thing is, it's so complex, but there's also a bottom line. So I'll talk about the complexity first. So, like, there are so many reasons. There, like, and this is what I say to you, or what I'm talking about when I
All the
say
time,
you
yeah.
can't just pick one thing. And the more you learn about this stuff, the more you realize that there are so many facets to it. So we have, like, is there genetic predispositions, biological, environmental, opportunistic? Is it conditioned? Did they see it in their family? I mean, we saw it. For example, let's look at adolescence. If we can bring this in, right? in the show Adolescence, I'm not sure how many of you have seen
I
it,
would say
but there
most
are
of the people watching will have seen it at this stage, yeah.
hopefully, and I would encourage you to watch it again and slow it down and slow down the observations that you make when you're watching it. You can see now a lot of men are giving out and they're saying the dad seems to be getting the blame for everything. I actually didn't get that at all. That's not what I saw, and I'd be curious as to the lens at which you're looking at it through, whether you're looking at what's hiding in plain sight, or actually are you missing that completely? Because if you look at certain things with it, for example, and let me start with the man
Oh, yeah.
and the dad, right?
Yeah,
Um, the man at one of the last scenes talks about the dad and his anger and frustration, and while also honoring the fact that he was a good dad in some way, says, you know, I think I allowed it or I enabled you, and they're having a cry, and then they go away and have the rest of the day, and she enables him again. He has a full blown male tantrum in the car park. He cannot take an adolescent or a teenager saying something. That provocation, that fragility of his ego or his dysregulated nervous system cannot take that provocation. And so he attacks and throws an adult tantrum and loses his shit. And the mother goes along, sits quietly beside him. She's like, what are you doing, giving out? But she still enables and allows and follows it through. Now we can go into her stuff as to why that might happen, but just in context,
in
that does
context,
happen.
yeah.
We see the police officer's son when he tries to talk to him about the whole red pill stuff in the Matrix. The dad almost can't contain his frustration and not understanding, and actually interrupts that young fella several times.
Yeah.
It was so hard to watch. I was sitting on the couch at my partner's time going, oh my God, let him talk, because he wouldn't let the child talk and explain the situation. And he kept going, I'm not understanding, I'm not understanding. And that dysregulates an adolescent. That will dysregulate anyone if someone is constantly interrupting you and piping in when you're trying to explain something that's quite hard to do. So that was the police officer not holding space, allowing the child or his child to talk about it. We see the older prison officer fellow who's really, really incredibly creepy with the psychologist, completely in her space, interrupting her job, following her, leery.
Leering
And
around, yeah.
absolutely. And even the psychologist, not, I don't know if it was done on purpose or not. I feel like it probably was, where she didn't address that to him. You know, she could see he was odd, but she was also focused on what the child was doing, or Jamie was doing, that she was not addressing him and actually how out of line he was being. There was loads of instances of where internalized misogyny, double standards, power
You
dynamics
mentioned a
going on
couple of,
the
you
whole
mentioned another
time.
one. You mentioned another one earlier that I thought was important to add on just for you to add layers to, which was when Jamie's inside in the room and you see, let's call it, and please correct me on this, by the way, and I want you to do this as if we weren't on a live, says please.
Mm,
I'm going to talk the way I would normally talk, and please come in and do what you do. So, the way I saw it is Jamie sitting down, and then you see the alter ego to Jamie. You see the side of Jamie you haven't seen before, where he goes and he loses it, and he said, when I done what I did, and then he loses it, and then he starts standing over her in a dominant position, and then how that, and he flips away the chair and he walks over, and it's until the big tall burly security guard at the door shouts in Jamie, big masculine figure shouts in, and he puts down the chair and goes over, and he gets nice again for a minute, and then he starts winding her up about you being afraid of a 13-year-old. That, like, I'm guessing you're not going to leave Jamie do that in that moment.
So the thing is, the really good thing I saw with the psychologist is she didn't engage in the power dynamic. She didn't play ball, you know, which is really, really important, because don't forget, people that are in this power dynamic thrive off of feeling superior, feeling like they can get a reaction out of you. But what I did notice, again, yeah, with that prison officer, absolutely. Another thing, how the teachers in the school were can and then lost their shit several times, and so we're seeing older men in their 30s and 40s again so quick to fire with aggression in the classroom, shouting. And this is what the younger adolescents are watching. There's no calm, there's no connection, there's no softness. very little consequences. Again, roaring, nobody is taken out of the class and said, actually, that's not okay. We need to take you out because this is actually messing up the classroom dynamic and all that. There's very little held accountable, but loads of aggression. If if
I
if
fully agree. Yeah, yeah.
That's what I noticed
I
anyway, is
agree.
there's very little accountability. Even the principal was kind of, when she was introducing the female guard, or she introduced the male one first and then said, oh, sorry, and also officer, or whatever she called her name, and that was only an
Second class
afterthought.
citizen. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Can I ask
and
that though?
yeah.
Like, when, how important is, I have a million questions I want to ask. How important is it for males between, and females the same? How important is it between, and I'll get to the comments in a second, folks. Girls between the age of 18 to 8, or 8 to 18, and I'm just going to go because I know 40 is 8. So 8 to 18, boys from the age of 8 to 18, to have those type of, and I'm gonna, again, please chime in and correct me, the right type of role models, the correct type of role models. I had said this in a podcast 3 or 4 weeks ago, that my biggest worry for your two boys, for my two nephews, for our nieces that will be there soon, is they're going to go into a world where toxic masculinity is celebrated, where people at the people who make the most lies on social are the people who are coming out with domineering attitudes because it's clickbait content, and those are becoming the role models for the 8 to 18-year-olds. So, two parts. First, how important is it to have good role models, and what is the impact of that based on behaviours or their mindset? And then I'll get on to the second question when you answer that.
Huge. So with children, the same sex parent is the main role model, and that's whether they're present or not. So if you're a son that has an absent father, the son notices the absent. If you're a son that has a father who is present in a family home but always on the phone, absent father. If you have a son who has a father that's around him but highly reactive all the time, you have a child who maybe walks on eggshells or doesn't feel good enough. Again, kind of like the things Jamie was exhibiting in the show. Um, I'll give you an example, right? So I was listening to the radio today, 95 FM was on about Chloe Crisis thing, and they actually played a snippet of it. And my 8-year-old was in the back of the car, and he said, "Is that thing that happened the other day with that girl and the man with the belt?" Now he didn't understand the context of it, and I said, "Yeah, yeah, that's the story." And I was trying to listen, and I said, "What? Why are you talking about that today?" Because he brought it up again. I said, "Is that on your mind?" And he said, "Yeah, it's on my mind." And I said, "Why is it on your mind?" And he said, "Because he shouldn't treat her that way." And I said, "Why not?" And he said, "Because it's not nice." Right? So we have an 8-year-old that understands right from wrong. Where has that shifted? And a lot of the theory will talk about a difference between like people that harm people and psychopaths and all that, without getting into psychopathy. But empathy is the biggest thing, is the biggest, I suppose, shift in how we treat each other when we have that, when we can understand what it might be like for another person. So in that moment, my 8-year-old was able to empathize with the girl. If he is growing up in an environment, and this is far from perfect, the environment, right, where we're rearing him in, but if he's growing up in an environment where it is okay to do these things and it's quite normalized, so we have environmental stressors, then we have conditioning where he's learning that, and now we have him hearing us talk in a certain way. And there's a lovely saying we use, which is, the way we talk about things is the way we think about things. So if you hear adolescents saying things, but they say, "Oh, I'm just joking," they're likely thinking of it that way. So you have to be very mindful of the content people are hearing and getting fed in all the time. And the algorithm, the extremism has an awful part to play on the phones and the content that children are allowed to watch and adolescents are allowed to watch at a time where their brain is really soaking up all the information. And if we want to have a need met, if we want to, don't forget, right, psychology based, there's so many biases, there's so many theories to understand why we soak up some information and ignore others, right?
Yeah.
So especially people will have heard of confirmation bias, where we look for stuff that confirms what we think. The thing we're not teaching children or adolescents is why you want to hear that so much, and is there a way to get that in a healthy way? Is there a way to get intrinsic motivation from things rather than seeking external validation from people that maybe don't deserve it, or maybe whose opinions are actually quite dangerous and damaging for you. What it costs you educating our children or our boys or our men, what it costs you to choose that person's perception of you and how they feel about you and what they think about you, over what you really want, that intrinsic motivation, that integrity that you have. That I think is so important with the role models, and what we're consuming, whether it's content, whether it's talk, whether it's behaviors at home, whether it's the behaviors at school. Again, adolescence just showed how from the police station to the school to the home to the playground, it's everywhere, to the phone. And
Yeah.
they said it. We thought he was safe in his room. If someone has access to you unconditionally, you're not safe. You're always open. You're a gateway. People are able to get in as long
It
as they
was
have
scary,
access.
like when you think of the impact of the 80-20 thing that they talked about. So
Yeah.
80% of women will only like 20% of the guys. And how staunch those three boys, Jamie, Ryan, and I can't remember the other guy's name, how staunch they were in the 80-20 thing, and how important it was to be liked, or Jamie saying he wasn't the best looking of those three, and etc. Like they pick something up online and then it gets reinforced from their peers or their social group, and then it's a thing.
And
And
it's
that's
wrong, right? And it's wrong. If you like this idea that girls don't like or like bad boys, or good guys come last. Who says that? Just think about that silly sentence for a second. Nice guys finish last. To who? In what? What are we talking about now? Are you talking about relationships and we're saying that most people in relationships are bad? I do couples counseling, and when I see a couple that works well, and I kind of know off the bat whether these people are going to stay or not, because they have the same values, they appreciate the same things, and the relationships that work are the ones that are committed to working. It's not that they get on so great and they believe everything or they agree on everything. It's that they're committed to not seeing the other person as an enemy. And that's vital for us to get on as humans, right?
absolutely, yeah, absolutely,
So
absolutely.
if this girl doesn't like me and I'm hurt, can't I just be in my hurt? Why does she have to get it? So we're not teaching children or boys or ourselves even at times how to regulate that emotion and be with it ourselves. Why do we have to offload it? And there was a sentence I learned, I think Brené Brown said it, and she said, blame is the discharge of emotional discomfort and pain. So if we are blaming everyone, we are not holding our own pain. So if we were to just hold that, right, and this is a controversial opinion that I say, but when we talk about feelings, and I always say this with suicide or even anger or anything, if you were to just sit with your feeling and not do anything and never do a behavior, you'd actually be safe in that. It would be hard, it would be
I told
excruciating,
me that before. Yeah. No,
but you'd be
nothing
safe.
can
You just sit
happen.
there.
I think your
Nothing
words
can
were enough
happen.
if you just sit with it.
If you
If
just
there's
sit
no
with it,
action with sitting with it and you just sit with it, nothing bad can actually happen because you're just sitting with it. It may be uncomfortable, it may be not nice, it may not feel good,
you might want
but
to scream,
yeah,
scream. But people shouldn't get it because you can't contain it, because you can't
Michelle
navigate it,
has.
you can't process
I
it.
want to ask one more question, then I'm going to read the comments.
Yeah.
I wanted to get clarity and go deeper on questions. So I wanted to ask, what do you think, and this may be phrased wrong, so correct me, please. What do you think toxic masculinity actually protects, and who does it harm the most? And if that needs to be reworded, please reword it.
Who does toxic masculinity protect?
What
Top,
do you think?
who does
What?
it protect? It protects the fragile ego of a male, to me, in that who benefits from it, right? Everybody is harmed by it. Because if you look at Andrew Tate, does he look happy? Does he look like he's having the great life? He's always given out. He's so angry. He's he's literally in and out of courts, held here, done there.
He
If he
genuinely feels
actually
like he just wants to be loved. Like, I'm like, you just need lots of TLC. You might smile.
no, and I think no, I think that's a myth about being loved. I don't know, and I wouldn't throw darts in the dark here trying to figure out. But there is something quite fragile and dangerous within him that he is willing to go so far to obtain and hold on to. Whatever it is, the feeling of power, the feeling of dominance, the feeling of superiority, control, I imagine, control of men. It's not just women, like, women will talk about, and men will talk about the impact of Andrew Tate on, on women. But I actually think it's massive on men as well, on the brainwashing and the thing he does. He takes the good out of a man. Like, men are fantastic. They're amazing. I mean, by nature they are stronger and they're so capable, and yet now we get them to use that in a harmful way when it can be used in such a great way. And I don't agree with Jordan Peterson, but he does talk about the formidable male is the one who has the capacity to be dangerous but isn't. That to me is what healthy masculinity is when you are able to use all of your traits in a way that does good and holds you in the highest regard. Again, all integrity based. But for toxic masculinity, I think it protects and hides fragility of the ego.
I would agree with that. I like that logic. Why is toxic masculinity becoming so apparent, so public, so noisy, so impactful, so damaging? Because it's like, it was when we were younger, we didn't, and I don't want to say we didn't know better. It was different. We weren't as educated. We didn't have access to the information like you have now through mobiles, through online. I can go to ChatGPT and go, educate me on toxic masculinity from this standpoint, this standpoint, this standpoint, this standpoint. We didn't have access to that. Now you have access to far more information, but people's attention span seems to have shrunk. Their What they trust is real information, and just like credible is the word I'm looking for. Credible information they don't know, and they'll jump on this. And why is that such, in your mind, such a big thing now? There is so many people following that fucking idiot, and wanting to do stuff and wanting to support, and I'm hundreds of thousands, millions. He is literally worth hundreds of millions because of the subscribers to his toxic masculinity shit. And it's not just him, it's Mr. McGregor over here, it's the boys inside in that are after getting in over in America. It's all of these people in these positions, where you can go in and just bully a president of a country where they're at war, and do it publicly and purposely bring in all the media just to do that. There's just patterns and waves, isn't there? Why, in your mind?
Um, Saturation. It's absolutely everywhere, and like you say, they always talk about this with Trump in America, that he'll throw out a load of stories and hopefully one sticks. And I think that's what happens is people are consuming, and yet again in schools, yet again in jobs and lots of things where we're not taught to critically think about stuff and why we do the things we do. So even just from a conditioning and a learning perspective, I think I saw a post before, and it was this woman was cooking a certain meat, and as whatever way she cooked the meat, she saw was cut off the end. And one day her husband asked her why she cut off the end. She said, "No idea. My mother used to do it." So a lot of the time we're following stuff, not looking at who taught us, who gave us the idea, why did it, why do we do that, and even though they did it 100 years ago, do we really need to do it now? And hearing messages and being one of the boys and looking for that sense of belonging or that sense of good enoughness. Like if you think about the type of fella that believes that 80% of women are after 20% of men, and they automatically feel like they're in that 80% of men, why do they not like themselves so much?
Yeah.
How low is their self-esteem to be on the floor that they automatically assume they're in the 80%? And they might say, oh, well, if I was in the 20%, I'd be getting offers at girls or whatever. Again, discounting all the other reasons as to why that mightn't be happening, right?
Yeah.
And I have girls in with me in therapy every single week wondering in relationships why they can't find a guy, why they can't do this. And I challenge them with the same ideas about, are there other reasons you're not thinking of as to why this might be happening outside of you personalizing every one of them?
I like that.
Are there other reasons? And so we're challenging the preconceived idea that it must be me. And then for men, it must be them, it must be the women. Because if it was something about them, and this is where the power is, they don't realize the power is actually in finding out what it is. If they just looked within and said, actually, what can I do to increase my chances? So let's say hypothetically women do like nice men. What are actually nice men? Are they nice on the outside? And I always say integrity is what you do when no one's looking. So if I am a guy that will say hi to women and be nice, and then behind their backs slight them and give out about them and treat them like shit or hurt them behind closed doors, you're not really nice, right? You don't have that integrity because
Yeah.
you have to be embodying that stuff. You have to be internalizing it and believe it. And so if a man or if somebody with low self-esteem wants to go, how am I not helping myself? The way you're talking to yourself, the kind of people you're hanging out with, the behaviors you're engaging in, the lack of integrity you have in your life, the lack of alignment, the lack of goals, the lack of motivation, the lack of discipline. How's your diet? How's your exercise? What are your friends like? What's your job like? Do you even like your job? Are you getting paid enough? Do you want to ask for more money? Like, there's a million things you can
There's so
actually
many
do besides
variables there.
hurting somebody else to take out your anger, frustration, or try and get what you want. Own it and take responsibility. You're big enough and you're bad enough to hurt someone. You're big enough and bad enough to go to jail or go to prison, but you're not big enough and bad enough to look at yourself.
Why
That's
is
a
that
fragile
this?
ego. That's a fragile ego. They don't
Like,
want to
can you
see.
explain to people? Because I remember years ago, long before I ever got into business, let's say we were still in college, maybe just afterwards, and maybe you were going through your course and you sent me on stuff about the ego, the ID. I may get, I haven't looked at this in years. So I'm going to go with the ego, the ID, and the super ego.
Yeah, like that's philosophy now, and I'd have to go back thinking about that. I did philosophy for a year in college, but that
Is
was
there,
the
sorry, but I don't want to get, is that got to do with it? Am I mixing two things here? If I am safe, because it's not, we want to
you're
educate
not
people. When
really,
you say
but like
the
the
fragile super ego, what do you mean? Give it
our
context.
our our ego is the protecting part of our brain whose goal is to survive at all
Okay.
costs, right? So I gotta survive this. I don't care how I do it. I'm just gonna do it. So I'm gonna blame the teacher for me not studying in my maths quiz. Now your teacher could be an asshole. I'm not saying they're not, but I'm saying could there be another reason? So could there be? Could I be wrong? What if I'm wrong? Am I black and white thinking? Could I have done a bit more work, even though the teacher is an asshole? In spite of the fact, so now that I know the teacher is an asshole, does that actually mean I have to study more? For example, if you are diabetic, it doesn't give you an excuse to be shitty with your diet. It actually means you need to try harder or you need to
Okay.
do XYZ. So it explains it. It doesn't excuse it. You still need to do the things you need to do. So the fragile ego is the one afraid to look at their flaws and insecurities or the things about them that they see as maybe failures or weaknesses. So the part of them that fears rejection, we all know how you build up a tolerance to rejection is you get rejected more. Whereas if these people are terrified of rejection, they're going to avoid it at all costs. How do I avoid something at all costs? I get it for myself. So I beat it or I attack it or I drug it or I make it or I force it. And that guarantees non-rejection. Same as sexual violence,
So
same
the
as
same is the perception of what you could associate to what might have happened the weekend. You avoid the rejection by taking
making
off
it
your.
happen.
Okay. Right, I want to get into some of the comments and we're going to come back to that. You made a point earlier, and Katie Sheen came in and said, "Love that, Michelle. It all comes back to the why. Why are they angry? And then it comes with the growth that creates the change. But it takes the person to make the move to accountability to their actions." Laura Jackson came in. Laura, hope you are feeling better and delighted you got your flowers. She said, "Loving this live." Murren came in and said, "This is one of my all-time favorite lives for Equitas." That's a nice compliment to get. Michelle is such a wealth of knowledge and relatable. Thank you for opening up the most important conversation. Gosh, I just love Michelle. Thanks, Alice. Joining us from joining us from all the way in America. I hope Kaiser is doing well. I love his floppy ears. Brendan said he is still trying to learn that. I'm curious as to what you're still trying to learn.
Yes,
Uh,
Brendan, what are you still trying to learn and can I help?
no, he's going to ask to come on the live stream. And no, you are not coming on the live
Send
stream,
a
Michelle.
message. Send a
Stop
message.
inviting people onto the live stream. Katie Sheehan said, Michelle, you're an amazing speaker. Folks, by the way, I should have said, if you have questions, if you have something you want to ask Michelle in this moment, be it personal, professional, in this space where she can answer it publicly, please put it in the comments. I wanted to ask, how do you feel when you see stuff like The Weekend? So you touched on it at the start of this chat, but do you feel that how do you feel from a societal perspective? Because one of like somebody commented today, they sent me a message, right? And it's a guy I respect. He's gone through a lot. He's talked very openly about his mental health. And he came back in and he said, and this is why I'm asking the question. He came back in and he said, this isn't like it was based on the article I wrote today, and my article was about men need to be part of the solution, not be the problem. And I quoted a 74%. And his exact phrase back to me was that men, this is a societal issue. This isn't a woman issue. And I went, I fundamentally disagree. This is a
He said
man
this is a
issue.
woman's issue.
Oh yeah, 100%. I'm gonna find that this is
If,
this sorry.
if there were no
I
men
said it's
in
a
the
man's
world,
issue, and he said it's a societal issue. He didn't try and blame the women. I'll find you the exact piece right now.
okay, but
Um
Shane, okay, I don't need to hear the rest. If there were no men, there wouldn't be an issue,
yeah, fully agree.
right? So
Yeah,
there you
fully
go.
agree.
So if there are no women, men will still do it because that's where the high statistics are. So even if there were no men in the world, there would still be a massive amount of abuse and violence, men versus men. We see it. Look at the wars, right? Look at the presidents. Look at what's going on. So if there were no women in the world, this issue would still be there. But if there were no men in the world, there might be a tiny percentage,
You're
tiny,
flipping.
maybe.
You're flipping. Sorry, no, you're right. Yeah, my apologies. I heard you wrong.
Yeah. So if then there would be a tiniest issue, and I guarantee the women would deal with it
But
by looking at themselves.
there's endless stats around that though, like around negotiations and having women in the room and having men in the room, and the likelihood of uh, a both sides win, will win-win scenario coming from the women's side, and there being a one dramatic winner and one dramatic loser from the men's side. Where does the psychology come from for this? Like when that person messages me today and they say that, where does that come from? Because I'm in the last 6, 9, 12 months, I've become far more vocal about this. As you've educated me more, as I've understood more, as I've wanted to learn more, I get far more shit about it. And Grant, no problem. I love my job. I love the role I am and the responsibility I have. And it's the right thing to do. My moral compass is sound. But when a person says something like that, where does that derive from?
Honestly, I've no idea what he wants. I've no idea what his point is. When he says it's a societal issue and he doesn't get into that, it takes 75 years to break a social norm. 3 generations is what it takes to break a social norm. Therefore, if I stop this with my children today and I get them to talk about women in a positive way, their children's children will reap the benefits of it. And that's what's in the research. So we are society. So when we say it's a societal issue, that is us. That is men and women are highlighting it and bringing it up all the time and asking men to be part of the conversation and to have the conversation. So what your man is saying is true, but it actually means nothing because he hasn't given another point with it. But the biggest thing, the reason the reason I think that women aren't pulled into this is because of the power, the lack of power men would have. And I was saying it to you earlier, you know, with sexual abuse, for example. Sorry now if this is triggering to
No,
anyone.
like, you get it, yeah.
Just to talk about childhood sexual abuse, for example, the majority of people that do acts like that and commit acts like that aren't pedophiles. They are men in a position or looking for a feeling of power. So like what I said, it becomes something you can control. If men feel rejected, unfortunately, one of the main reasons why they do it is because a child can't say no and can't defend itself. Therefore, it's guaranteed success. To say it in a really awful way, but that's what
That's what's happening, yeah.
the reality of it. And I was telling you earlier, you know, I have a client who, again, a lovely male, and I was talking to him about just his behaviours at home and different things that were going on. And I said, "Who do you shout more at, your wife or your kids?" And he started laughing, saying, "I know you're going with this." And I said, "Humour me." And he said, "I shout at my kids more." And I said, "Why?" And he goes, "I know what you're going to say." I said, "Just tell me your reason why." And he goes, "Because they can't fight back, because they won't tell me fuck off. They'll take it." So we see that even in a dysregulated adult tantrum, a lot of the time we will talk to our children way different than we will talk to our partners in a lot of people, or we talk to our partners to way worse than people we might talk to in public. Why? Because we can get away with it. And so that's where the integrity and the intrinsic motivation has to come from. Do I want to do it? I want to stop doing this now because it actually doesn't make anyone feel good, not me or the child or the family. And so really holding yourself accountable on the small stuff in your family home, in the school, you know, holding people accountable for the small stuff a lot of the time takes care of the big stuff, because it stops it escalating, which we've seen that triangle, you know, of
Yeah.
how small stuff, locker room stuff, leads to rape and murder eventually, right? It's the small stuff that
Yeah,
underpins.
I've literally written about it using that exact visual you sent it on to me.
Yeah,
I'm nearly sure in one of the first 8 or the first 4 or 5 editions of Equitas, when it was still in magazine format. I'm nearly sure about that you sent me on. It was a purple and white visual.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm nearly sure. It is. Are you worried about society and the world we live in, sis?
Am I worried?
Yeah.
I'm more hopeful, you know, because I see it in my job. I see it in my job. I'm rooting for people. You know, I see great men. I see great men around, so I see that. I don't live in despair like that, but I plan on being fairly intolerant and cutthroat with certain behaviours in my boy's future, to root out a lot of this stuff wherever I can and do whatever I can and take it extremely seriously. And I always say that to people: don't panic, but take it seriously. Um, and root out this stuff wherever we can. I'm more worried about the extremism and the stuff we're seeing escalating, that part. And I just cannot, like, legally wise, repercussion wise, consequence wise, which actually is why we got onto this conversation today, because you were asking me about consequences and do men only do things when there are consequences. I think the consequences need to be higher. I do think that is a thing. It is something I see in my job. Unfortunately, I don't know, this is just a theory I have, but there's a lot of the time, I had two theories. There's a lot of the time men only change their behavior when there are consequences, for a couple of reasons. One, they focus on problem solving. If they can do nothing, complaints to them, people voicing, giving out, moaning, whinging, whatever they want to call it, even though it's all valid, they feel like I can't do anything, or they minimize it. And then the second reason is they're so shut off from their emotions that unfortunately they need a physiological kick up the arse with something bad happening before they change their behavior. So when someone leaves, when someone threatens to move out, when their partner leaves, or, you know, has an affair, or where someone beats them up, or something happens where there is a physical jolt in their nervous system, then I see men moving sometimes. And I give you examples of that, you know, that I see in my job daily.
I find it very interesting. Um, because Katie Sheen, who's watching this, I'm nearly sure, sent me on that video, and I'm sure it's something that'll come up on our podcast over the ripple effect. Was And she said the way she phrased it to me, she said, I find this really interesting. I've watched this 3 times. I find it really interesting. And it was about consequences. So can you give, or even if you want to put me in the firing line here, and I mean this, like, I want to directly understand that because I had to ring you about it today. I watched it the same and Katie sent that video on to me. And folks, I'll share it to the Equitas story straight after this live so you can see what we're talking about. It was about consequences, and men won't actually do stuff until there's actually drastic consequences in play. Um, he wants to be a man that will not just make it. I love that. I'll read that in a second. Fiona, we love you, by the way. This is an awesome comment. Fiona, no, we'll just read it now because we might as well. Fiona has been sitting listening to this with me. He's 13 next week. Has an awesome new haircut, by the way. He just told me that he wants to be a man that will not just make me but Equitas proud. Thank you for opening this conversation. That is an absolutely beautiful comment. I love that.
And Fiona, just to add to that, the most important thing here is that you become a man that you're proud of, that sits well in right in the pit of your stomach, that you're happy with. That's way more important than anything, because that has to be the motivator for all the decisions you make throughout your whole life. So that's the measure, that's the bar.
That you're proud of yourself.
Yeah.
I love
That
that.
you are happy with who you are and you can back up all of your decisions and all of your choices and go, if it was wrong, it was wrong, if it was right, it's right, but you're willing to face yourself and look at yourself and not just make other people proud.
I like it. I really like that. Can you explain to me about the consequences again, please? So, and then what I want to get onto before we finish up is guys being part of the solution. What I love about how Michelle sees things is I used to be very black white, literally very black white. And I realized you can't be the leader you want to be, nor can I be the person I want to be. Michelle's pointed out to Finney, that's her smiling. If I'm thinking about these things or do these things in that way, or being that judgmental that I would think it's black or white. Nah, there's a million variables at play. It could be grey, it could be pink, it could be a lot of different things. It could be black and white mixed together, it could be a lot. But one of the things I've definitely learned, and when you said it to me today, I fully agree, is consequences derive action. I'm going through stuff at the moment, sorting stuff out, as you know why. Because if I don't sort it, I will lose things that are really important to me. But now that I know I could lose them, consequences, you'll go and solve them all straight away. There is stuff, I put up a post recently and Alice was mentioning it, and I know she's here, and it was only years after when I got a new girlfriend that I thought about the consequences of losing this person if I was to not value them or their sacrifice or etc. like Alice had done, which I didn't understand. Explain that consequence side from a guy's perspective as clearly as you can, because I don't think guys understand this, and I want to take this as a clip and send it out.
Well, I can never explain it from a guy's perspective because I'm not a guy. I can say it from my perspective as a woman watching men in therapy and watching men in my own life and stories I've been told, which are thousands of them, within my job. But I'll give an example. Sorry, Dave, he's probably listening now. But when I met my partner first, and I said this to you earlier, so I'm dropping a minute, he had Tinder on his phone and I never had Tinder. So we were together and we were exclusive. And I said, why do you still have Tinder on your phone? And he said, oh, I don't use it. And I said, well, if you don't use it, why do you still have it? And he goes, sure, what does it matter? I don't use it. And I said, oh, that's fine. I'll download Tinder too, and I also won't use it. And he said, okay, I'll delete it. So he had to suffer that feeling, that immediate feeling of, oh shit, she's downloading Tinder too. And I used his point against him. And then he said, okay, I'll delete it. Because now he was left with that discomfort of she's going to have it too. When it was him knowing what he knows, which is he might have never have had an intention to use it. That's irrelevant. For him, it only changed when he felt that consequence himself, that actually this is what it's going to be like. And there's a lovely theory that natural consequences are the best teachers. So if you do something bad and you feel guilty, that's brilliant. That's a sign that your nervous system is working perfectly. You're supposed to feel like you did a bad thing when you do a bad thing. Shame is different. Shame is I am bad. Guilt is I did something bad. So if you hit someone or you hurt someone or you do something like that, reactive or whatever, you're mean, because you're hurting and you acknowledge it and own it, and the best apologies, behavior change, and you actually make amends to change that, well then I don't see any issue, right? Provided you try and make amends. This is
I
outside of abuse.
I
Obviously I'm
get
not
the
talking
principle,
about
yeah.
abuse. But for a lot of men and a lot of people I see in therapy, I almost have to give them a relatable experience for them to understand, or to for example, I had a client whose dad used to smoke and he only gave up smoking after he lost his leg. So he had to lose his leg. And honestly, I have hundreds of examples of where men have only done things when they have had an almost physical jolt. So when a partner's packed their bags after months of leaving and telling them that they're going to pack their bag, men, losing someone, and I hear you talk about this yourself. Unfortunately, it seems like sometimes you have to suffer the loss before you recognize that what you had when you had them.
100%.
Um, and so that's what I mean. It's really, really hard.
I'm going to get on to Dave's comment here in a second.
Yeah.
But you said something today, and I found it fascinating. And I'm going to try and just get your mind into that space because I'm not going to remember word for word because we've had so many chats today. But you talked about how guys want to be part of a solution and how they want to give the solution to something. But if they don't understand what the actual action is, and if they're hearing noise or this, can you explain that? Because I'm doing a hatchet job on it here. But you explained this to me today, and I sat down. I'm not joking. We got off the phone, and I would do it a fair bit, to be fair, because I have to think. There's very few people I talk to I have to sit down and process sometimes, because a lot of what you open my eyes to, I may literally fundamentally disagree with in my heart and core beforehand. And I'm going, right, this is a seismic shift in my mindset or my understanding that has to take place. But you started explaining this today, and I was going, holy shit, that's the Bermuda Triangle. That's the place where shit goes missing because there's what we want men to do, what men think they should do, and what everybody else's fucking opinion is. So can you explain in layman's terms what you tried to explain to me today, please?
I'm actually not sure which point you're on about. Like, which
You
which
talked
one are you
about
on about?
guys want to, I was talking to you about being part of the solution, and you were saying guys want to give solutions to
Oh
stuff.
yeah.
But if guys don't know definitively what the solution is that they can give, and they're hearing different noises,
Ah, come on. So they do. Like, are you joking me? The same. We're singing off the same hymn sheet for the last 1,000 years. Men know what they have to do. So what I see, and I even say this to my partner. Sorry, Dave, dropping you in again, right? Men will do, or a lot of men I know, a lot of men I see in therapy will do anything for the people they love, as long as, and I'm not generalizing, I'm not saying all the time, I'm saying in certain instances, when they're something to do with them is on the line. So they will advocate, fight for, have your back, do all these things. But if you were to use the same point against their own behavior, defensive. Never happened. I don't do that. Right? The curiosity in men to solution focus when it's themselves is so hard for them to do, I believe, because they're just not used to doing it, comfortable, willing, um, vulnerable enough in that moment. But men are solution focused, right? I see it all the time. They want to fix it. They're like, tell me how, tell me how. I'm doing couples therapy with a couple at the moment, and the man in it is always saying, I just want to know what I have to do. And his partner always wants to just say what she's feeling and the frustration and the upset. And a lot of the time, she mightn't even know what she wants him to do, but she just wants to be heard. So if a woman says, I want to be heard, and a man says, tell me what to do, and she's saying, I want to be heard, he'll say, I don't know what to do. If she wants to be heard, that means you just have to listen. But he doesn't hear that. He's like, give me practical, give me something I can actually do. Him just being with her, just listening to the complaints. If men actually sat back and listened and say, what are women asking? Don't talk shit about us. Don't hurt us. Don't harm us, right? Violence is anything that causes harm. So don't be violent to us, physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. If we can do that, and if you do it, apologize first, repair, and try not to do it again. That's it. And then men are like, I don't know what to do. That's it. How is that hard to comprehend?
When you put it that way, it seems very simple, doesn't it?
Well, you tell me, you're the man. How is that hard? Which of
I
that
don't find.
can't you do?
First off, this wasn't the point, but we'll go into it because this is a good point. I don't think it's hard to comprehend at all. I think if you put yourself before the woman, then it's harder to comprehend because you care less about what they're saying and their actions. If you put them before you, then all of those things are really easy. And if you do it side by side, then it's communication, collaboration, and it's a
Right.
cohesive relationship that works together as one. But the old Shane, if I'm looking personally, would have gone the other way, and would have been as nice to you as I wanted to be until I got what I wanted, and then shame comes first.
Right, but
Whereas
then that's
now,
not integrity
all
though.
the,
Then you're not being nice.
that
Then you're nice with a goal.
no, that's 100% what I'm getting at. I'm trying to highlight previous narcissistic tendencies I had and narcissistic behaviors I had. We discussed some of those today, and went down through them and etc. Now with who I am and how happy I am and where I am and what I am and the way I think and believe, I would absolutely go the other way and most of the people on. But I think there's logic. Where I was going and what we chatted about today was how men can have impact in a societal perspective for issues like this when it comes to toxic masculinity, issues like Chloe or Ella have faced. And how we need men to stand up to be part of the solution. Like at the end of the day, women have wanted this change since the beginning of this shit happening, and it hasn't worked. So women can't provide the solution here. Men have to be heavily involved in this solution. Why? Because for generations before this, they haven't been, and the solution hasn't been fixed because they're pushing against any possible solution. Now, with the era that we're going to live in, with AI coming, with the digital era we live in, with the access to information we have, with toxic masculinity on the rise, you have to go, men have to be part of it. So when you take the context of what you've just applied and the brilliantly simple way you relate that and how they can support, be clear and be on the same page, how do we do the same thing over here when it comes to the societal perspective of issues like what Chloe faced, what Ella faced, and just the incredible amount of this shit that's happening all the time? Because the equine industry is fucking ripe with it.
It depends what perspective you're taking. Like from the guy in reception who wasn't at reception, recognize how you not doing your job can actually endanger the lives of women. Be where you're supposed to be. And then he also, I don't know the full story, sounds like he saw the guy,
I
presumed he was her boyfriend.
literally said I presume that was your boyfriend, but never
Right.
asked the question.
Never asked a question. And then after, I wonder, has he said the story correctly or honestly about why he wasn't in reception or what he was doing? I mean, if you're on about the perpetrator, you being angry at someone, the world yourself doesn't justify you doing those things. Find another way. Find another way that doesn't harm somebody else. Trying to get men to go to therapy, try to get men to seek help, trying to get from the childhood up regulation tools, learning to name emotions, learning to talk about them, learning to describe and hold space for the pain and doing something with it that isn't um, ideally around aggression or macho building or any of that. Find a way to be vulnerable with the feeling you're feeling. Having the hard conversations with the friends. But again, like this is all what we're singing for years and years and years. In a nutshell, though, and I would just say this, just do no harm. That's the whole premise of psychotherapy when we're told at the very beginning, if you're going to do anything, just do no harm. So if you're not sure if what you're going to say is going to be helpful or hurtful, don't say it. If you're not sure what you're going to do, if you do hurt, because we're human, in a non-abusive way, hold yourself accountable. Try and take the steps to change it. Um, but it has to start from the bottom up. And we've seen it in that show Adolescence. It really does come down through everyone. And now there's other areas coming out now being heavily researched, epigenetics, which is how certain genes are present moving down from families generation to generations in the genes, which predisposes you to being vulnerable to certain traits and behaviors and different things. So we have to be incredibly aware of the impact of our decisions today and what they have on our children's children and our children's children, and trying to break cycles, even if you just break one in a family, or two, and you can try and stop those cycles. Try and talk about and naming an emotion,
How
just getting it
important
out.
how important is it to have those small chats? I find myself more and more lately um having discussions with people, mostly men, to try open their eyes. Some women, to be fair, where they think there's no issues and women are grand and they're equal, and I just fundamentally disagree. But to be fair, 95% men, probably one in every 20 is probably female. Um, those small chats, those, do you really think that way? Do you honestly believe that women are the problem here? Do you honestly believe that society is the issue here? Do you honestly believe that you're a victim in this scenario when you've made all these wrong decisions that have led you to this point?
So it has to be a lot more curious and less rhetorical and kind of judgmental, which that kind of comes across as. It has to
No,
be
go on, yeah, go.
it has to be like, I wonder why you would think that way, or what do you think about that? And sometimes Dave will ask me a question, and I'll say, well, what do you think? And I want to hear what he thinks without me leading him, or without me, like, I want to see what he thinks, and then I might challenge it, or I might say something. And it's having those conversations, like you said it today, that you put up a thing about, like, unfollow me, and you're kind of like, that's an emotive response. When we do that, we're not opening up the lines to actually understand. I'm
Yeah,
not saying you have to
I
entertain
regretted it
it.
afterwards. I
Yeah, I'm
told
not
you, like,
saying you
yeah,
have to entertain it. Like, if someone is abusive and mean, like, block away for your own peace. But if someone is genuinely interested in having a conversation with you, um, I had a client before who I was working with for a decent amount of time. I need to be mindful of what I'm saying now, so it doesn't, I don't break confidentiality. But I was seeing him for a decent amount of time, and one day and I'm not joking, this happened when the Barbie movie came out. He actually came into me, and I'd been working with him for a year and a bit, and he said, "I hate women," and I said, "It's incredibly hard for me to see how I can support you when you feel that way. Why do you feel that way?" And it was a very awkward conversation. And a couple of months later, he left. He left the therapy. But for us to be working together for a whole year or so and got on really well, and we helped him overcome lots of issues that were going on in his life, but definitely had an element of toxic masculinity, had an element of bravado, very vulnerable guy, masked with a lot of toxic masculinity. You'd never see him coming. But for him to watch a movie like that, which confirms probably stuff he'd already been thinking of anyway, maybe he didn't feel comfortable, or maybe he wanted to challenge that. But either way, that movie, which that sphere highlighted at the time, the Andrew Tate stuff, all these vulnerable, fragile egos came out of the shadows, saying that it was trying to turn women against men, and that's not what it was at all. It was just turning the dynamics of what's already there on women, right? It just flipped it.
yeah, literally.
Um, but that's what you're facing all the
So,
time, is the
but
battle.
what's the, and I've only a couple of more questions.
Yes, it's bedtime.
What? I know you got about a half name. I want to, this is too good a chat for me to go taking the piss. So in that moment where I'm being, and this is the same because I know there's lots of people that will watch this that will do the same thing. Am I projecting where I'm pushing back hard as opposed to being curious? What am I doing in that moment? Is it a way of me being defensive in that moment where I'm
You tell
pushing back
me.
hard with my opinion?
You're asking me why you just did what you did. So you check in. This is exactly what I'm talking about. You check in now and go, why did I lead with that? Which is tiny bit aggressive slash judgmental.
Yeah,
Like a tiny bit of, why did you lead with that and not curiosity?
because I'm probably leaving emotion override in that moment. I'm like, it should be black and white.
Why
We're
should
back
it
to this
be?
thing.
That's
Yeah,
an expectation you have.
what it it should be just, it should be clear, it should be fair, but that's not the world we live in.
According to,
Eh, According to how I see the world,
right, but yours isn't the only view.
100%, yeah. That's why I'm asking. It's
Right, so
fair.
we
So,
have to
but then
understand
if you to
everything.
try and encompass all of the views.
No, you just understand that yours isn't the only one. So again, this is where we include the grey. You're saying black or white, and you're saying I have to include everyone. Absolutely not. You just have to recognize that yours isn't the only. You're not the only person to be rejected. You're not the only person to be hurt. You're not the only person to be sad. This is where the victim mentality comes in. You know, when clients come in and something really bad happens in their life and they say, why me? And I always say, as insensitive as this is going to sound, and I mean it with such compassion, why not you? Why shouldn't this happen you above other people, right? And it's really hard to look at ourselves in that way and go, actually, I'm not special. I'm just somebody else that this shit happened to, and I need to figure out how to get through it. The man that is rejected, the man that is hurt, he's not the only one. There are loads there. But when they go together and they say, oh, it's just us, it's just us, 80% or whatever shite that is, it's just us. And it's like us against the world. We have to fight. We're the victims against this big thing, and we have to fight this fight. No, you only have to do your own stuff. You just have to figure out how to deal with your pain and not put it on anyone else. That's all you have to do. But they're going to offload it, right? So it's just you catching yourself in that moment to watch your black and white thinking, watch your expectations versus reality. There's a saying we use, which is the further your expectations are from reality, the more frustrated or disappointed you're going to be. Right? So
Really, really something similar in the start of the world, yeah. I like
yeah,
it.
so you have to pull it in, rein it in and understand it. You're not trying to think of everyone, but you're also not the only one.
I like that. So, what is your message to men and women out there when it comes to what has happened with Chloe, with Ella, and what seems to be an ever increasing problem in one, Ireland, and two, worldwide? And I'm leaving that broad on purpose, by the way. This is your platform to say what you want to say. And just so you know in advance, because I know you're thinking, my last question is going to be, what is your advice to people when it comes to their mindset, their habits, their behaviors, and how they talk to themselves? So, first question, I'm giving you both, and then we're finished. First question, what is your message to men and women out there when it comes to Chloe, Ella, cases like that, what is happening in the world we live in, and like I said, that seems to be ever increasing.
I think for men, the thing, and I'm trying to be compassionate here because I have two sons, is by not doing this work, somebody else and you will pay the price for it, right? Whether it's your families, your relationships, the life you're about to have, the life you're having at the minute, there is a cost to every decision you make. And you not looking at yourself stops. First of all, it stops the peace you get when you actually come to terms with accepting who you are and how you are, and then realizing the things you can control and the things you can do to help yourself. The liberation and the freedom in that is brilliant, but you're never going to feel it when you're confining yourself to the extremes in thinking and beliefs, the beliefs of fragile men, the beliefs of a fragile mind, actually. And that's what the message would be. You miss out, you're missing out. And not only that, you're causing harm. And inaction is a choice. And you are making a choice to not partake and be part of it. And you are making a choice to just keep going through it. And there is blood on your hands from it, because I can guarantee you every person has, and especially even now, just with the conversation we're having, we spoke about it earlier, you yourself can think of moments where you did something that may have caused harm to somebody, and we are all guilty of that. And until you recognize that you are one of them and we are all one of the same, like that, now some definitely more extreme than others, and you can hold space for that, then, even like that theory in psychotherapy, acceptance and commitment therapy, you need to accept where you are first and acknowledge where you are before you can move to another spot. And then for the women, my message would be just keep going. I mean, women are now in education better, they're getting their voices heard. Just keep going. Like, we're so relentless and unbelievably strong and capable. I, even in this world, in this climate, I would be a woman any day, any day. And that's kind of just the message I would give there with that. Just keep going, keep voicing it. The people that tell you it's your fault or do any of that, they're avoiding a feeling in their tummy. When they go up into their brain and they say, is it because of this? Is it because of this? It's because they can't take what it feels like down here, which is usually actually guilt or helplessness or powerlessness, that these things can happen and there's very little we can do about it once a perpetrator decides they're doing it. Um, that was that question. What was the other one?
Well, before we get on to that, folks, let us know in the comments because Michelle will hate this. How have you found this live? What have you thought, Kate? You can remember the first comment. I'm not going to read it yet. I'm going to leave Michelle sit and simmer on this because she's so good at doing them with me and because she's my sister and just because I'm doing this in the family and I always get what I want. Isn't that right, sis? My last question was, what is your message to people on their mindset, their habits, their behaviors, how they talk to themselves? Um, you have helped me evolve so many ways in how I look at myself and how I think and how I act. And many people around you, Dave was in there a minute ago and he made a comment earlier saying the same. He also wants to know, do you want tea? The answer is always yes, Dave.
Yes,
Just so
please.
we're clear, she
Yes.
definitely wants tea. I think touching on what you said there, a lot of people don't self-reflect enough. They don't ask themselves the questions and they're afraid of the answers. So what I wanted to finish up on is, what's your final message to people in a very generalized term, not aligning it to Chloe, not aligning it to Ella, around self-reflection, looking at themselves, asking themselves the questions, their behaviors, their thoughts, their habits, that kind of thing.
Like the whole time, every moment we're alive and we're listening, we're consuming, we're talking, we're engaging. Our brain, the neuroplasticity is learning and strengthening and reinforcing. So it's vital to watch what you're consuming. It's vital to watch how you're talking and the things you're saying and the things you're listening to, because all of it is getting reinforced. And your brain does not differentiate between what is great or what isn't. It just knows what you're doing most of the time. So if you're doing something a lot, or you're thinking a certain way a lot, or you're doing something a lot, your brain goes, oh, you really need that one. Let's strengthen that one and keep it at the front. That's kind of how it happens. So just be mindful of what you're consuming and the content. And honestly, just sit with yourself a second as you're consuming. Even watching influencers, this isn't a diss on them, but watching certain people living their lives can make you feel like shit. Stop doing it. If watching Andrew Tate, if watching some of these ridiculous people makes you feel angry, why would you continue to watch it? Why would you keep doing it? And look at, what is your anger motivated by? Is it by a political cause? Will it actually help the greater number of people? Look at how your feelings are actually motivating you to do things. Are you a person of values? Are you a person of feelings? And differentiating between the decisions you're making and how they're aligning with your values, or are you just doing stuff based on feelings? And that's it.
Just a wonderful way to finish it. But before we go,
Shane, it's better.
um, to celebrate you coming on, first off, look, before I read this for myself, thank you. We were having a chat today. Um, I've learned a lot, evolved a lot, and look, we both know I've taught you so much as well on our journey together, and helped you understand so much about life. But jokes aside, I learned so much, I evolved so much, because I want to, first and foremost, but because I have the right people around me. I get compliments all the time for where I am and who I am and what I do, but it's because of the people and the network I've had growing up, the surroundings, and the people around me have evolved and they taught me how to evolve as well. So once we chatted today, I really wanted to get you on and I wanted to have this chat publicly because I felt it would enhance people's understanding of what's taking place, why it's taking place, and how we can potentially be involved to do something. So
Mm-hmm.
with that in mind, Katie Sheehan came in Dave, get that tea ready, but we're finishing up in about 30 seconds. Katie Sheen came in and said, Shane, you are so lucky to have Michelle as a sister. I'm jealous. Michelle, you're amazing, honestly. Thank you for sharing your knowledge. That's how change is created. I could have 4 calls to stay on this live. Brendan came in and said, will be rewatched 100%. Alice, Alice came in and said, love it. It's very refreshing to hear from a professional who is so knowledgeable and passionate about therapy. And then in brackets said, and I'm the youngest in the family and I'm the third loved. I think she means you, Amy, first, her third, and me fourth. Thanks,
Oh,
Alice. I
yes.
appreciate it. You're
Yes.
lucky you have our baby boy over there. She said, I always feel energized and healthier when listening to Michelle speak on this topic. Thanks. Sis, thank you so much.
Thanks
Folks,
for
the
having
one
me.
the one constant.ie. Head on over, check it out. I know Michelle is a waiting list at this stage, because she's exceptional in what she does. And look, thanks for coming on, sis. You've been
Thanks for
amazing. This
having
has been
me.
brilliant. Thank you so much. Enjoy the tea, get some rest, and I'll catch you later.
Okay, we'll talk to you
Folks, we'll chat
soon. Bye.
to y'all soon. Bye bye.